Hello and welcome to Entertainment of Excellence, the podcast where we talk about films, TV, all of it. Hi, I'm Ollie,
I'm Thom.
And I'm Ben.
and today we're going to be discussing the 2019 film The Irishman. This will contain spoilers.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so this is quite a long film, being 3.5 hours, and we usually encourage people to watch the film before the episode, so here we're just going to give a few tips on some ways to watch it. So if you want to watch it as Scorsese intended, so that he doesn't come around to your house and, beat you or paint your house, for instance, then some recommendations for watching a long film. Watch it in the morning is usually best. I know that kind of sounds weird, but over the summer holidays I was watching loads of films in the morning, and it was great because you get up fairly early. Well, for this film, get up at like 8, right? You get ready, you brush teeth, you have breakfast, and then you put this film on at 9 o'clock, and it finishes at 12:30, and then you get to have lunch, and you've got like the whole day ahead of you basically. And then that 3.5 hours doesn't feel like much at all. It's probably best to also like not have your phone on you, because otherwise you will just be messing with it all the time. So
Yeah.
basically, just don't have your phone. Watch it in the morning, and you'll still have loads of the day ahead of you. And that's the best way to watch it.
That being said, we didn't
do that.
Yeah.
We didn't have time. We're busy.
There's another way that you can do, where you can break it into segments and sort of watch it as a little mini series, which I know is absolute blasphemy, and you should never consider doing such a thing. But I'm sorry, we ask for forgiveness. That's exactly what we did. we just found basically an image with some timestamps on it, and it broke it down into 4 sort of 40 minutes to an hour segments, and that was a lot more. It felt better, especially if you've got a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. You don't have the time to sit down and watch it 3.5 hours, straight. So yeah, that's a good thing. Maybe just try checking online. There'll probably be someone who's broken it down into at least 2 different films.
There's loads of different breakdowns of when to pause it and stuff. So
It's difficult to motivate yourself when you're not in the cinema to watch like a whole film in one sitting, especially if it's this length. But I definitely think the way the mini series structure that we found, like the 4 episodes all had very distinct tones, and because the film was pretty much like a capture of like 3 men's lives, and they're all sort of distinct moments in their life. So I think they definitely, the way it was broken down, it did feel like watching a show.
yeah, I feel like Scorsese probably should have done it as a mini series, just because
Yeah,
it is quite sprawling and there's like loads of different points. But I can see it working. I mean, I've sat down for long films before, like, the Godfather trilogy or Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and obviously Lord of the Rings. But 3.5 hours, although I did say I watched Lord of the Rings, but it is pushing it a bit.
Yeah. I think just to be clear, so the timestamps that we used, episode 1 is sort of the introduction. It's called Here I Heard You Paint Houses. It's start till about 49 minutes when Jimmy Hoffa ends the call, and that seems about right because that's sort of after his character's introduced, and the next episode is titled Here Hoffa, and that's another like 50 minutes to 1 hour 40 minutes when Joey the Blonde is introduced. And then third one's What Kind of Fish? That's 1 hour 40 minutes to 2 hours 47 minutes 30 seconds. Which is when Frank exits the house. Brackets, you'll know when. And yes, it's very clear you definitely will know when. And episode 4 is it is what it is, and that's just from 2 hours 47 minutes to the end.
Well, that was the shortest one, right?
Yeah.
And the third was the longest one. Okay, we're going to go to spoiler territory now, so we're going to assume you've watched it.
Yeah, we are.
What do you think? Okay, so I'm going to go out and say it. The third episode as we watched it, so the third quarter was definitely the best.
Yeah.
Or at least the most engaging. Just the
middle
the kind of ramping up. Yeah, the mid two I kind of liked. Well, yeah, the mid two felt like they could have been their own film. My problems with it comes where it probably could have trimmed a lot of the first bit out, and also that they could have trimmed off the last bit. But I actually really enjoyed the last like 40, 50 minutes. But we'll talk about that later. But in terms of what I'm expecting from Scorsese, so I've seen like Scorsese films. I've seen Mean Streets, Goodfellas, and Shutter Island. I may have seen some more, but I'm not sure. And that third part of the ramping up of tension of Hoffa just kind of getting into a worse and worse situation, and then eventually ending in definite spoilers now. Frank shooting him. Bear in mind, like he's his friend. That is what to me felt like Scorsese's thing, because Shutter Island has a load of like paranoia and you're not sure what's going to happen, and Goodfellas towards the end has this like really big build up of loads of things happening, and it's just the tension constantly building and stressful. So that was where I felt like Scorsese really shined. I mean, he didn't write it, but the direction was good in making it feel impactful.
I think the end of the third episode, some directors would have probably left the film off there with like that big climax, maybe like an additional 10 minutes at the end or something, just to. Well, I don't know. It could have left on that sort of cliffhanger, but because it was more of a depiction of the effects that organized crime and all these events have on one man's life, I think the last episode, as we watched it, was provided like quite an intimate conclusion, and it sort of looked at the deterioration of sort of the health of the protagonist, but also all the people surrounding him.
Ironically, I actually thought the last part was rushed. I
felt that as well.
The last part could be its own either short film or film in itself, as an exploration of an aging gangster, just kind of seeing them all in prison getting all together. I mean, being old in prison, that must be a pretty weird experience, and they're just playing like bocce or whatever it's called, and struggling to eat, and it's quite a depressing look at that. And then you get to find out so much about Frank at the end. Like the thing that really hit home with me was like his fear of finality, which was quite ironic, seeing as he spent his life murdering loads and loads of people. I mean, you never find out how many, and then you find out that he's scared of finality, so he doesn't want to be cremated because it's too final. He wants to be buried, and there's that like heartbreaking final scene where the priest leaves and he's like, "Don't shut the door, leave it open a bit," and that shot as it just kind of zooms out with the door slightly ajar, so you can still see Frank, and then the film ends. That just really struck a chord with me. I don't know. I really liked his fear of aging and finality. That was such an interesting theme to explore, but in the 3.5 hours didn't have a chance to explore somehow.
Yeah, well, I think the thing about like inevitability of being killed in this system and finality to say was something that was hinted out throughout, because there's quite a lot of shots where it would show supporting characters and then just sort of freeze for a few seconds, and then the
Yeah.
text would pop up like "shot in the
This.
head 3
Yeah.
times."
Yeah.
But something I felt was quite weird and a bit unresolved throughout the film. It's sort of told with him narrating it as a really old man, and this it's sort of ignored in certain sections. Like at some points, it features it quite a lot, but at some points, it's pretty much all just flashbacks, and you sort of forget about that. And it's never explicitly revealed who he was talking to, but a lot of people say it was the author of the book that this film's based on, which is called "I Heard You Paint Houses."
Yeah.
I've also
That
heard a
make.
theory that it's his confession to God, sort of getting all of this off his chest because you never see who he's talking to. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's interesting because it also kind of ties in with the theme of finality of him not. The police come round to him when he's like really old, and literally everyone in the mob is dead, and he still refuses to tell them what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. And that's kind of
yeah,
like you don't really know why he's doing it. Is it this kind of fear of finality thing that he doesn't want to feel like everything's over? Because I mean, he tells them to call his lawyer, and they're like, "He's dead,"
yeah,
and it's just
I find
that's cool.
yeah. I mean, as you said, the whole film is sort of just progressing throughout his life, and as you said, it was sort of the last quarter. I felt too was very. It wasn't like rushed in terms of time, but like the story progressed really quickly because I don't think I was paying like 100% attention because I was quite tired. But it just seemed to me that in like 1 minute everyone's alive, everyone's fine. The next, all of the other characters have got these terminal illnesses, and Frank's in a really really bad shape, and then just everyone dies and he's on his own, which like I love the concept of, and I loved what execution there was on screen. I think I just felt it was like too much too quickly. They could have like
yeah.
built up a bit, maybe.
And
Because for
another
me,
thing that
a
was
lot of
slightly
the
rushed over.
most
Oh, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, a lot of the most poignant scenes are in the last, what was it, like, half an hour, and, like, those obviously, there's the scenes where he's thinking about his death and whether he wants to be cremated and choosing his coffin, but then there's also that scene where he's confronted by his daughter, and then they sort of say,
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
"You never showed us any attention. You always prioritize your job," and that's something that wasn't too prominent in the film, I'd say, because of the perspective always being on him. You never really got to see the effects it had on his family. You did to an extent, but I think that confrontation was very impactful. But as you say, it is sort of rushed over in a weird way.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
saying
mean,
I'd want the film to be 4 hours, but
you see a lot of him and Peggy, his one of his daughters, and then
yeah,
it was like at one point in the film, I was like, wait, he has three more daughters. When was this
yeah.
established? That was kind of randomly happened.
yeah.
Um, maybe they could have thought about that more. Maybe it's on purpose to kind of show he didn't really, I don't know, care about them. uh, it's
Well, I think a few times. Um, well, I believe this is actually the only Scorsese film I've seen, I think, which is
all
a
right.
bit weird because it's very much like an end of an era with all these high profile actors and
Yeah,
Scorsese and all that. But obviously, this is actually based on real events, and sometimes maybe they wanted to have that authentic feel to it, so they had to sort of include these things that they didn't really have time to explain in the film. But at the same time, I've seen that Scorsese said the point isn't how accurate is it; it's to look at this depiction and look at his version of it rather than comparing it to what actually happened.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Have you seen Hugo? That's like randomly a Scorsese film. You might not have realised was one.
That was a
but
Scorsese film.
yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I've seen it.
there you go.
I think so.
There's like a few random ones that aren't just gangster films. Like I've seen Shutter Island, and he directed Wolf of Wall Street. Cape
Is
Fear's
Hugo that
pretty good.
film about the clock?
Yes.
Yeah, in the train
Yeah, I've
station.
seen that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I need to see Taxi
Oh well,
Driver
I guess
and
I have
stuff.
seen Hugo.
Yeah, I've seen that
There you
and
go.
After Hours, which is a completely different film again. Like, I think,
Is that what you
honest,
Didn't you recommend it one time?
I did,
It was
yeah.
like the first episode back, wasn't it?
No,
There
it
you
was like third or fourth, but like, it was. It's kind of weird because this is like the first Scorsese film I've seen that's like his style that he's known for. So
Yeah. This I'd say the pacing of this doesn't really feel like any of Scorsese's other gangster films that I've seen. Well, I've only seen 2 of his gangster films. I've not seen Casino. It feels a lot more kind of like The Godfather in a way, or Godfather Part 2 maybe is more specific because that has a load of flashbacks in, and also
Yeah.
Robert De Niro, and Al Pacino. So it's kind of
Like,
a
the
lot more
scenes with
slow-paced exploration rather than his style like in Goodfellas, which is really dynamic, bombastic violence and drama and conflict and stuff.
yeah, like the scenes where they're blowing up cars and stuff. There wasn't actually that much action per se, I'd say, in it, which is
It was only a few clips of like 10 seconds of Frank walking up to someone and then shooting them 3 times in the head and then walking off. But
yeah,
when it happened, it was like, oof,
yeah,
yeah.
very
But I think a lot of those
concentrated.
were reminiscent of like The Godfather because there's the thing where he's on about going to the bathroom before you have a shooting, which is in The Godfather
It is. I was
with like the
thinking,
blowing up
what is that
cars.
from? I was like, what's that
Yeah,
from? And yeah, someone goes to the bathroom before they shoot. Yeah,
it's Michael.
nice. I feel like we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the de-aging CGI.
Yeah,
Yeah,
No, now, when I first saw it, I was like, who are these rubbery men? They look gross. Why is his eye color changing every shot from like purple to bright blue to like really pale blue? But then luckily they don't try to make him look 30 anymore. And as they're de-aged less, it starts to look better. And just one thing I wonder is, I mean, yes, it is Robert De Niro and I don't know who else is at de-aged to it. Joe Pesci is, I guess. But did they really? Couldn't they just get younger actors and seen how it worked? Because that's what they do in The Godfather. Robert De Niro plays young Vito
yeah,
and all of that stuff. I don't know if they could do that. Don't get me wrong. Like the performances were amazing in this, which we'll probably talk about a bit later. But because it's not, I mean, it looks pretty good for what we've got. It looks better than like Grand Moff Tarkin or whatever in Rogue One. Is it Rogue One that he's
yeah,
in?
yeah.
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 Um.
Well, something that I found quite weird. It's actually something that they addressed in. I don't know if you two watched it, but there was like this thing on Netflix. I think it's called The Irishman in Conversation. It's like a 20-minute thing with the 3 main actors and Scorsese just discussing random stuff. But
Yeah.
in that they talk about something which I noticed. It wasn't necessarily the look of the actors when they were de-aged, but it was more like the mannerisms and
Yeah. I
the
was
way
gonna
they sort of
talk about
walked
that.
and stood up
Yeah, it
that
was.
was a bit
The most
jarring and
obvious, example of that is when Frank finds out Peggy was, I think, like bumped into or something by a shop owner. I can't remember. He might have actually hit her, I think, or shouted at her. I can't remember. But he goes up and he's supposed to kind of like beat him up, but he stood there with kind of like chicken arms and
Oh
kicking
yeah,
really awkwardly, and it's like,
yeah.
couldn't you
But
just
there's like
got a
huge
different
like
actor?
smacking sound effects, and it just
Yeah.
felt not really realistic.
It was just
The one that they say in the Netflix thing is that it's just like a really insignificant scene, but it's just where Al Pacino's literally standing up from the chair, and the
Oh,
first few times he did it, they were like, you're supposed to be 48 or whatever, and you look like a 70-year-old man."
I mean, he is.
Yeah, I
yeah.
know. So it would be difficult because it would be even more difficult because they're having to play them at different ages and different stages through their life, so they have to keep on changing that. And
Yeah. I mean, Joe Pesci as old Russell was actually amazing. I felt so like terrible. He just seemed. I mean, he was still saying awful things about how like Hoffa definitely deserved to die. It was him or us. But just the way that he was old was kind of like really, his shaking hand and the
yeah,
way look
Oh, the
that
shaking
looked.
not being
hand
able
got
to eat
me.
the
Yeah.
bread and stuff.
So then, basically, when they were old, it was great. Oh man, Al
Yeah,
Pacino's 80.
wow.
No more say hello to my little friend or any of that stuff, I guess. But it's just they could. I know it was these actors' last hurrah and all those things, but I mean, I know Scorsese really likes Leonardo DiCaprio as a lead, and he's a great actor. Or even just looked for newcomers. I mean, I was actually the casting apart from the main three though when they were younger. I thought they were great when they were older. I mean, even Robert De Niro when he was Frank, from about 50, age 50 onwards, you could excuse the mannerisms and it was great.
Yeah,
But some really interesting. I mean, Jesse Plemons. I always want to see more Jesse Plemons. He played Chucky,
he was just
who
talking
was
about
I was
Hoffa's.
fish.
surprised to see him
Yeah,
actually because
That's all
he
he did, really.
he's popping up all over the place now.
yeah, because the
Yeah,
I
last
think he's
episode
great.
we recorded chronologically was I'm thinking of ending things, and so when he just popped up on screen, I was like, oh, it's
Yeah,
him. What?
yeah. He's in
he had
Breaking Bad and all that stuff.
Argo.
And also, someone I was surprised to see, but very glad, was Stephen Graham as Tony Pro, who is from Liverpool. I don't know if you'd know that from his performance, but he is definitely a Scouser. I can tell you that. If he's been in uh,
Scorsese joke.
Martin Scorsese, he's been in a series of Line of Duty as one of the criminals, and his big role he was like in This Is England, the film, which is supposed to be really good. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Snatch. He's been in. He has actually been in quite a lot of things. Oh, he was in Line of Duty Series 5, but he is a really good actor. But I didn't think I'd see him much because of his Liverpool accent. But I guess he managed to pull off the American accent pretty well. I mean, there were a few words that I noticed, but I think it's only because I knew he was from Liverpool that I realised that they sounded a bit off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was good to see him
Well, there is
because
a
I think he's
massive
great.
cast. I'm just
Yeah,
realizing now.
there's a lot of people, and there weren't any like dodgy performances. I thought they're all great. Harvey Keitel, sure, let's just have. They were just throwing him all the gangster people randomly. Why not? Scorsese's like, oh yeah, Harvey Keitel, he was in Mean Streets. He's got to go in. Joe Pesci's return. I've already talked about him, but he's so good in Goodfellas. He's nothing like it in this or Home Alone. Like, he's really violent and aggressive, and he's great. But a lot of good choices that I can't remember all of right now. or it's people that you may not know the name of, but you'll go, oh yeah, I swear I know him from somewhere.
Yeah.
The main cast are all, apart from when they're trying to be young, are all really good. I mean, Al Pacino is always great as the person that disagrees with everyone and is kind of like a lone wolf looking out for himself, but also has a really believable bond with Frank. How he likes him, which makes his murder from Frank all the more kind of shocking and disheartening.
Yeah,
like he just
like
turns around, bam, bam.
There's that scene where he's shouting at everyone in his office, and then Frank starts to walk out. And he's like, "Oh no, it wasn't at you."
Yeah,
yeah.
But
and also his like bond with the daughter Peggy was like,
yeah.
I mean, my first instinct was like, that's a bit creepy because he's an old man, but like, he seemed to like genuinely have like a connection with her, and when he was like talking to Frank, was that like the bowling alley or something?
Yeah.
He was just like, hang on to your family. You've got a good thing here. Call her over, talk to her. You know, I can understand her being scared of me, but she shouldn't be scared of you.
That was Russell.
Was that? Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Not Hoffa.
Well,
Peggy actually liked Hoffa, but
yeah,
Russell liked Peggy, but it wasn't reciprocated.
Peggy's just such a central character.
Obviously.
I mean, like, I was joking, but like, to be fair, she does like tie in, like, it sort of grounds Hoffa, I guess. And then later in the film, like, when you can obviously see Frank regretting that he hadn't spent time with her.
Yeah. There is some great like attention to detail. Like I wrote this down, that in the background they had the Twin Towers in the backdrop. I was like, ooh, that's a cheeky thing that they've just put in. So they remembered that. And the shots, I mean, there's so many great shots, but it's kind of old style, so you don't get any new wide shots or kind of symmetry that's come before. But it's the classic gangster film. So because I've seen like Godfather and Goodfellas and Scarface and all that stuff, I kind of got some nostalgia, even though I've only seen them like a year ago. It was still like, I was like, oh, this feels good, you know.
Back in the good old days before 2020.
Yeah, but I mean, it was good. I really liked it. So I don't know. The
it reminded me
cinematography
of
was really
watching
good.
Godfather about 2 months ago.
Have you seen Godfather Part 2?
Not yet, no.
Oh, I've got all 3 on DVD, so you can watch.
So do
if
I.
You want. Nice.
So do I.
But yeah, nice. I'm trying to think what other shots there were. I mean, a lot of people being shot. Those shots were good. I was gonna say like the kind of montage at the start. Or, no, it's just a long shot, isn't it, through the care home that he's in. That looked really good. And I've mentioned the final shot is kind of important. There's a lot of, really intentional cinematography that works really well.
Well, this isn't really about the cinematography, but something that I quite liked with Robert de Niro's performance was the fact that as the film progressed, at the start he kind of looked out of his depth, and he wasn't really didn't really know entirely what was going on within the context of the organized crime. But then, as it started to move further through the film, you could like see that experience and that how he knew what to do and he knew who to trust. He knew because at the heart of this film, it's about loyalty and then betrayal, and you could sort of see this uh, amalgamation of his whole life in the latter periods of the film.
Yeah. Something else I noticed was the film wasn't like It didn't not use music because there were quite a few sequences where it had like songs playing, but it didn't so much use like a traditional score, which I thought was quite interesting because there'd be parts where like you'd sort of forget that like there was some music driven sequences, and you'd kind of just realize, oh, there hasn't been any music for ages, there isn't any background music, and then there'll be this great one where, oh, I can't remember what the song's called, but if you look in the credits, there were like a load of songs used, but there were barely any score used. I don't know. What did you think of that decision?
Yeah, it was mainly like in the flashback sort of sequences, and that's a lot of the film was conversation driven, and in those moments there wasn't a score, but somehow it got away with not feeling dull or boring in those
Yeah,
scenes. Um, but then, as you say, with the bits of action that were thrown in between these conversations or whatever, the sort of the music took the back seat, and it was there, but it wasn't like obnoxious or anything.
yeah. In the still of the night, that's it. It kept being played quite a few times throughout the film.
Yeah,
And so I guess that sort of became its like theme, even though like there was some. I only really like picked up on this in like the credits, because when the credits were playing, in the still of the night was playing, and then after that it got into uh this, I think it was harmonica driven uh music, and I was like, okay, I think I've heard that once before, but it just feels a bit weird and like not out of place, but like just when you look back on the film after 3.5 hours of watching it, like you realize how much of it really was just dialogue, and how I guess the action was just really condensed.
yeah.
I mean, I actually quite liked the soundtrack. Are we talking about the soundtrack? Sorry, I just crashed.
Mm. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yeah,
We were just saying that the soundtrack was great, but there was a noticeable decision to use like songs rather than a traditional score.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, there was a score, and I did like the score. With the kind of like
I can't remember
harmonica
enough
riff.
about it to give an opinion.
And wait, is the harmonica thing that is original, right?
Yeah, it was. That
That
was
was
just
cool.
right at the end of the
And
credits, I remember. I think it played at the beginning
it
as
was
well.
it was a recurring theme that
yeah.
throughout, and I did like that. And there are some of the moments that you know, I think it's a decent soundtrack overall. It definitely
Definitely
serves its
served its
purpose.
purpose. Whoa.
Oh
Whoa!
no.
Crazy. Mental.
Radical.
That was weird.
The best part is over here there was like no delay as well.
Well, maybe on the actual episode, yeah, but, it'd be a bit awkward if like I just said it 5 seconds after. It's like, why are you just overreacting to you copying him?
Yeah.
But,
I'm trying to think. Okay, there was one editing note I noticed. The editing overall was pretty good. You managed to follow the jumping between time periods and all that stuff. But there was just a noticeable awkward cut with like a really important scene of Frank on the phone call with Jim Hoffa's wife Joe. That it's really
Oh,
kind of an
well, that
awful
was a
phone
bit.
call. But right at the start, there was a kind of quick jump cut, which I noticed.
Oh,
I
that
don't think you're
yeah.
supposed to
yeah.
notice it, but it felt
I didn't know
off.
if that was something to do with Netflix or like a buffering or something.
You just
But
went like Joe, jump cut Joe.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. So it wasn't Netflix boogie out then. That was actually the edit. Okay, that was a bit weird. I don't know why they did that.
Like,
No.
part of me is like, I'll forgive them because one really bad mistake in 3.5 hours of film is like really not that bad. But then also the flip side of that is if there is only one noticeable awkward mistake in 3.5 hours of film, it's going to be really noticeable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it was intentional. Maybe it was some creative vision that we don't understand.
It didn't, the best part is it didn't
Yes.
even seem to serve any purpose. Like, it wasn't. I guess you could use a jump cut there to show like the passage of time. Like, I don't know, he's been on the phone for ages, but it was right at the start, and there wasn't enough like time beforehand to like comfortably establish he was on the phone with Joe. As I said,
Let's
it was just
definitely
like
not
Joe,
analyze
jump cut Joe.
overanalyze this. This was most likely a mistake. We don't need to.
No,
really
we need to go into
like, move.
detail. That is our style. Hmm.
I think the pacing overall is pretty good. I mean, we talked about bits that felt rushed, but I never felt bored,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were
which
saying
you would
that when.
expect. Maybe it's because I did it in an episodic way, but you know, it didn't drag. So I think, although it is 3.5 hours, because so one of the first things I said when I watched the first part, I was like, I messaged these two. And I was like, "Wow, I'm not bored," because I was
Yeah,
fully expecting to be
but
like, "Oh no, 3.5 hours. How am I gonna get through this?"
That's really
well,
what
I
everyone
also
I've talked to said. They've been like, I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna watch The Irishman, and they've been going, oh, The Irishman, 3.5 hours. Really, I can't watch that. But I think most people would really enjoy it. Um, would probably be more tempted to watch it if you didn't mention it was 3.5 hours. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah,
or if it was if it had been made as a mini series, then it would be more approachable.
Oh
But
yeah,
and I bet
something
definitely.
many
else.
people would watch it all at once that wouldn't have
Yeah, I
watched the
know.
3.5 hour
That's
film.
the thing. People are quite happy to binge shows, but no one wants to watch long films.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
But
weird. Yeah.
but the thing is, I also felt that I didn't actually watch. I hadn't seen the episodic breakdown when I watched the first bit. I think I watched like I watched slightly into episode 2. It didn't really spoil anything, but it's quite weird thinking back. I was never bored at the start, but in retrospect, the first section was my least favorite in the fact
Yeah.
that I know it's a lot of establishing stuff and
yeah.
exposition, but it was just not a lot happened, and I
I
don't
mean,
know.
that was the one I watched when I said I wasn't bored, but I agree not as much happened as later on because I actually watched. So, I mean, we had the 4 episode thing, but I watched like the episode 1, then I watched episode 2 and 3, which is actually, I'm pretty sure it was over 2 hours. So that's
Yeah,
basically a film
it's
in
like a
itself.
film.
And then I watched episode 4, which is just about 40 minutes. And that was a really good way to do it for me because it felt like episode 1 is all introducing. You get introduced to Russell and Whispers or whatever, and it's kind of his introduction into the gangster world. Then 2 and 3, the middle of the film feels like the main film, like his relationship with Hoffa, building that up, and then the inevitable demise that, or the murder of Hoffa from Frank, and that's really impactful. And then the final episode is kind of like an epilogue, so that
Yeah,
was quite an interesting
I think
way to watch it. But
I
I
think
definitely watched 2 and 3 because I wasn't bored. I was like, well, I need to see what happens.
yeah, an argument could definitely be made that Hoffa is the protagonist of the middle of the film
Yeah.
because although he's not in the first or fourth sections, it is very much focused around him, and obviously he goes to prison and then gets
Yeah,
released, but the times when he's out of prison is very much uh, Sheeran's reaction to what's going on with Hoffa. Whereas that's why perhaps if you watched it in one go, the there might be some sort of tone inconsistencies that are more apparent because it sort of flips between between different points in their life, and inevitably that will lead to different pacing and stuff like that, which you don't necessarily notice if you approach it as separate episodes.
Yeah. Like another thing I liked was it. I was also worried that it was going to be quite pretentious because
Yeah,
Scorsese, he has to have the actors from the old gangster films. It has to be 3.5 hours. You have to watch it all at once. But I mean, like the dialogue, it still had that like witty dialogue from the older gangster films. Some funny moments, some the interesting family things. They did have the obligatory Italian gangster cooking, but although that was only a small part of this, it was Joe Pesci was making something in front of Frank. But it kind of still had that humor, and it didn't feel all wrapped up in itself, and had the impactful violence, although not as much as like Goodfellas or something. But it was,
yeah.
I think it was definitely enjoyable. It didn't feel pretentious at all. It was just a
With longer films,
fun
I
watch.
always have a bit of a fear that they are going to be pretentious because a lot of the time, in a way, the director's sort of been selfish in that they assume you have this much free time, which was sort of the case to less of an extent, but with going into Stalker, which was obviously a whole
Mm.
hour shorter than this, and because that was quite an old film, it didn't really it revolutionized quite a lot of the tropes that you see in films like that nowadays. But obviously, with a film like this, it is very much, in a way, exploiting um the fact that there's these high profile actors, this high profile
Yeah,
director, and it's in a genre where a lot of the films are acclaimed. You might think that it's sort of using that to its advantage, and people would not necessarily look at it entirely fairly, which I think is. I mean, I know I definitely enjoyed it a lot, and I can see why you'd rate it highly, and I can see why a lot of people would say that it's very good or whatever. But like a 94 Metascore seems
that
a
is
bit
high. Yeah,
Oh, that's
I
far too
I
high.
was I forgot about this. I did want to speak about the critic reviews are a bit. I don't know what they were thinking. Like, it is a really good film, but so many of them rated it 100 when there's obvious flaws like the de-aging. I mean, the acting's good, but the awkward kicking and some janky editing. And actually, I think there was a few lines of dialogue that were a bit cheesy. I can't remember what they are right
Oh,
now, but there was some that felt cliche. Do you remember any?
not off the top of my head, no. But
Yeah.
there were
Well,
definitely worse
basically,
some.
I don't think it should be that high. And to be honest, I'm
no.
gonna say I don't think like The Godfather should be rated as high as it is as well. But let's not get into that, or I'm gonna get killed. I think
Blasphemy.
Goodfellas is better than The Godfather. I'm saying it right now.
Get
That's why
out.
That's why Goodfellas is on like my
I
top
mean, I've
films,
never
and
seen
Godfather isn't.
Goodfellas, but sure.
I've never seen
It's
either, but
Scorsese
like,
and Joe Pesci and
I
Robert
know
de
it is,
Niro.
but they got it. I swear they took it off Netflix, which is annoying.
I think it's may have been put back on recently. I don't know. Have a
But
look.
I mean, The Irishman, it isn't a masterpiece. It seems like it's using what a lot of people deem as masterpieces to its advantage in order to sort of force positive reactions,
Yeah.
which
yeah,
I
it's
think obviously critics have embraced that, but quite a lot of um the normal reviews not so much.
yeah, it's very derivative with a lot of these high-profile actors and a lot of
I mean,
the.
they are good actors,
Oh yeah,
but
of course, obviously, but I think
could have
I
used
don't
different
think
people for younger versions.
yeah, I don't think they were specifically chosen because they were good actors. I think it's because they were good actors who've also been in similar films.
Yeah.
And it obviously has quite a few tropes in it, which weren't bad, and I don't think any of the tropes were like even like negative at all. They were just either neutral or done very well. But you'd be lying if you said that this was like new or revolutionary or or even like 100 Metascore.
I mean, basically, it's old-fashioned, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and that's
got
why
all those older shots.
It's
and
very
stuff.
nostalgic.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point in it, really, and I think that's why it's reviewed like this, because it's nostalgic, and a
Yeah,
lot obviously that can lead to a biased take on films,
and
Yeah.
it's just
which
these odd things like it's got a higher Metascore than Goodfellas, which I definitely don't agree with. I just think I did enjoy it, but was it revolutionary? Did it explore any like really important or new themes? I mean, there was the thing of finality which I really liked, but I said that was quite rushed. So I don't agree with it being as high as it is, but I will probably. I mean, I'm gonna give it a really good rating, but just not 10 out of 10.
Yeah. And
yeah.
on that note, I think we should start wrapping it up and sort of say what we personally think. Um,
Sure.
yeah, going for
Who's gonna go
45
first?
minutes. Yeah, I'll go first. S-
Go on then.
So I've obviously not, well, not obviously, but I haven't seen as many of these like gangster movies beforehand. So whilst I could appreciate that this is derivative and everything, I've not really seen any of most of like the tropes and stuff. So I know this slightly goes against my previous point, but anything that's like cheesy or whatever, I'm gonna find less so. So, but it was a solid film. The pacing was good, apart from the last bit, but that was more an issue with like writing than directing, I think. I'm not sure I'd watch it again though. I think that's what's gonna put it quite relatively low. Um,
I'm getting ready for like a really low rating now.
well, I'd say I enjoyed it more than Fear and Loathing, and it couldn't happen here, and more so than The Social Network. Yeah, I'm gonna go 7.3. That's on par
Ooh.
with Hollywood.
Okay.
Well, I think the thing you were saying about not being that familiar with the genre and stuff, which I also am not, um, that can work either way. It could either be like, "Oh, I've seen this trope used over and over again, and I'm fed up of it." But at the same time, the thing with, like, nostalgia, it could remind you of something, or it could be something that you enjoy. So,
Hmm.
I guess the fact that it repeats a lot of that, or not necessarily repeats, but just sort of uses it to its advantage, I think that could lead to negative or positive reviews.
Yeah. Are you gonna? I'm
Um
waiting for your rating.
Alright, well, I think the main issue for me, it wasn't even like, I'd have probably thought going into it that it would be the length of time and how would you make it not feel boring. But even the scenes where there's quite extended dialogue and conversations were engaging. I think if I'd have watched it in one go, not at the cinema but at home, then maybe it would have dragged a bit. But the main issue for me probably was like the de-aging, not technically how well it was done, just the limitations that puts on the acting, and
Hmm.
the fact that it just didn't feel as you couldn't feel as empathetic towards the characters because there was something just a bit off with them. But I'm probably gonna go higher than 7.3. I'm gonna put it at 7.8.
Ooh.
So that's like a
uh,
marriage Sorry, Stalk.
Cool. So I did really like it, and I thought that for how long it was, the pacing was good. But there were some things that I wish were explored more, which is talked about, and also like I just remembered that it's kind of done really just I don't know, like, it's done in passing, but it says like they shoot Sally Bugs for going into the courthouse. Then they find out later that he'd actually told someone that he needed to go into the courthouse for like some of his own personal thing, and he wasn't ratting on any of them. And you know, it could have explored kind of shooting innocent people and the effects on their families more than it did. But I mean, other than that, it was really good, and I'm gonna end up going in between Ben and Ollie, and I'm gonna go with I think a 7.6, which
Ollie's the good
although I
cop?
probably liked No Country for Old Men more, I'm pretty sure I rated it the highest out of you two. So yeah, I did. Yeah, so that makes sense. 7.6, cool, because I gave No Country for Old Men 7.7.
Groovy. So 7.57, or it's just sort of close to 7.6, is sort of
Groovy.
just below The Interview and above No Country for Old Men. Seems about right.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Definitely not a 94 Metascore.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. Shall we now move on to recommendations?
Yeah,
Sure.
I have a recommendation.
Oh, well,
I do.
Ooh,
I don't.
I'm gonna go first.
Oh,
So we had a little cheeky rant before about watching independent films, so I thought I'd recommend an independent film if that's okay with everyone.
No.
no.
Sorry. So this is like a small indie British film which has a tiny budget, and it makes me question how they paid for their actors. I think the budget
Operation
is like
Poison Sword.
Mafia money.
no. It's called in the UK. It's called
Trust me, the
Kajaki.
actors didn't get paid.
Yeah, they may not have been. In the UK, it's called Kajaki, and in the US, it's called Kilo 2 Bravo. And it's about this. I don't know why it's got two different names. It's about this kind of small group of soldiers that are posted in well, they're near the Kajaki Dam in 2006. I think it's Afghanistan. I've already forgotten what even country it is. And they're basically going out to try and take out a militia group, but they get stuck in a minefield. And it's about them trying to get out of this minefield. So basically, most of the hour and 45-minute runtime is spent in the minefield dealing with wounded people and attempt to get out. And although it's only in that one place for an hour 45 minutes, it's like really gripping, also really disturbing, and it's got some great acting. For example, Mark Stanley is in it, who you may know as Gren from Game of Thrones. Apart from that, there's not really many people you'll know. There's Malachi Kirby, who was in an episode of Black Mirror. That it was one about soldiers. It may have been the one with the like zombie people or whatever. I think it was that one he was in.
Men
But
Against Fire.
yes, that sounds right. But it's really good. It had a very small budget, which I will try to find. I swear I saw where it was. I'm sure I saw its budget. It got basically nothing at the box office, but it did. I think it was nominated for some BAFTAs and things like that. It's not it's not very diverse, which we talked about with the Oscar thing, but it is good. I mean, the soldiers say some dodgy things, but I'm going to assume that's because it's supposed to be a take on 2006 military men rather than the writer's actual beliefs. So, but yeah, it is really good.
Where can you find it? Like, what's it on?
Netflix.
Ooh,
Isn't that amazing? It's on Netflix. It
Wow.
only has
cool.
like 11,000 IMDb reviews, but yeah, it is now on Netflix, so you can watch that. I'm scrambling to try and find the budget, and I just can't see it anywhere. I don't know why. Its worldwide gross was 34,000, so that gives you something about that. But someone else recommend something while I try and find the budget.
Okay. So ever since we did the No Country for Old Men episode, I've been watching a few more Coen brother films. So like I
Nice.
rewatched The Big Lebowski. Oh, I
Bowling.
think we only watched half of it the first time we bowling. And then I also saw Burn After Reading, which was all right. But
Oh, Burn After Reading is pretty fun. It's not as good
yeah,
as the others, but it is fun.
but I'm going to recommend one of the other ones I saw, which is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, I've not
Which is
seen
one
that
that
one.
we talked briefly about on the No Country for Old Men episode. But unfortunately, I watched it at the start of the week, so I've forgotten it. So yeah.
Nice.
Not good.
No,
Have you
no,
actually
no,
forgotten it? Oh, okay.
no. Just because it's a Coen Brothers film, yeah, we always forget those. So basically, I think we mentioned how it's like a modern retelling of sorts of the Odyssey. Um, which is quite weird because like Homer is credited as the writer on the film.
Ooh.
Oh.
I can't say I'm too familiar with the Odyssey, so I can't say how accurate it is. But it's basically tells a story of three escaped convicts from like a depression style prison who are going after a some hidden treasure, also it would seem at the start. And well, there's three of them, but one of them's the clear protagonist that we follow, and played by George Clooney. And the other two are just like really stupid side characters who are quite naive and just follow his lead no matter what he says. But they basically encounter loads of weird things. Like they encounter some witches, they encounter the KKK, come across all sorts of stuff. But the end of the day, it's pretty much just a telling of redemption, and it's a look at the main character's reaction to all these circumstances and sort of how it changes him. But I think it's definitely worth watching. It's quite comedic as well. It's got a good soundtrack, and it's pretty different to some of the other Coen Brothers films. But I think in an underlying themes in a lot of them is sort of the main character getting themselves into a situation that they can't handle and how they cope with that, which is maybe less prevalent in this than some of their other stuff, but it's definitely there.
Cool.
Nice. Did you find the budget yet, Tom?
I didn't. I can't find it anywhere. I'm sorry.
That's so sad.
It was small. That's all I can say.
Well, I guess unless anyone else has anything to say, we can sort of wrap it up here. So we didn't have any submissions for the submission spotlight this week. But if you have anything you'd like us to review on the podcast, any form of creative entertainment or media, then you can contact us via Instagram or Twitter or by the contact form on our website, which is entertainmentofexcellence.weebly.com. You can sign up to our newsletter there to get exclusive news and access to the recommendations master list with links to buy absolutely everything we've ever recommended. So that is cool. And follow us on social media, and most of all, just leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. Give us an email. We're still relatively new, so any kind of criticism, be that constructive or otherwise, is very helpful. So, there's a plane.
There is a plane.
The plane is gone. So thank you for listening, and tune in next week for an episode which we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Alright, see
Could
ya.
be anything.
Alright, see ya.
Alright, see ya.
Yeah, that's it.